Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to make some of the graphs that we've covered in lecture 8, and you're going to need to do a little bit of this in homework number 5. Before I get into the video though, I just want to say I do not recommend using Excel and Google Sheets to make graphs in general. I highly recommend making graphs in a scripting program like R or even MATLAB, and we're going to do a little bit of R later on. However, I do think it's really useful and important to have lots of experience with these spreadsheet programs, and so it's just a natural extension of what we've done before. Now that you've done descriptive statistics in these programs, let's do a little bit of graph making. Okay, so I'm just going to do some really simple ones that we covered in lecture 8, and I'm going to show you how to do them in both Google Sheets and Excel because they're mostly similar, but there are a few slight differences. All right, so the data we're going to use is this data set on models of cars from the year 1993, and I've corrected the errors that I introduced earlier. Okay, so first off, let's say we want to look at the distribution of a numerical variable like price. So the best way to do that would be a histogram. So to make a histogram, I just select the price column, and in Google Sheets, I go Insert, Chart, and it just guessed and was correct that it was a histogram that I wanted with that single numerical variable selected. So this is great. We can see the distribution of these car prices, how there's a lot of them, a lot of mid-range prices, and then a small number of highly expensive cars, creating that skewed distribution. All right. If we want to look at the same thing in Excel, what I'm just going to do is copy. So I'm selecting cell A1, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom opposite corner, and I'm going to select all that, copy it, paste it over here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer, so hopefully you can see. Okay, so in Excel, same idea, select the column of the single variable, and here I go Insert in this menu on the top left, and then there's a bunch of little graph icons here, and I'm going to select this one with a little histogram and go down and pick here, and then I get the histogram of car prices. Okay, so back over to Google Sheets. The next thing I want to do is show you what if we want to look at the distribution of a single categorical variable, like for example, the type of a car, which in this case is a size class ranging from compact to large and vans. So I just select that column and I go Insert, Chart, and the chart that I got right off the bat is not the one I want. It's not making any sense. But if I just go over to the chart editor on the right here and I select this menu, I can scroll down and see what happens if I pick column chart, which is a bar graph. And now I've got the chart I wanted. I'm looking at counts of how many cars there are in the sample in each of these type classes. If I get rid of the editor and just select this thing here, you can see, you can even hover over these bars and see the frequencies in each category. Okay, so to make the same graph, I'm going to get rid of this one, just highlight it and hit delete. To get the same graph in Excel, you have to make something called a pivot table. So, and you do that by going Insert here and Pivot Table here in the middle of that top menu. Okay, or Pivot Chart. And then I just say okay, and what it's doing is it's creating a new worksheet in the same file that's going to be a pivot chart that you can build. There's nothing in it right now, and all you have to do is find the variable you want in this list of field names, and the one I want is type, and I'm just going to select it, and I'm going to drag it down to categories. And what that does for me is it makes, I'm going to zoom in for you, a frequency table of that column over here, showing us the counts in each of those categories. And we also got the bar graph we wanted. So that's how you do that in Excel. Okay, so now we've covered plotting a single variable and its distribution, both for a numerical variable and a categorical one. Next up, I want to show you how to plot the relationship between two numerical variables. I'm going to show you two kinds of plots. the scatter plot, and a line graph. Okay, so let's say we want to plot the relationship between something like, let's say, fuel efficiency in the city and a car's horsepower. So I've selected those two columns. If I want to plot their relationship, oops, I think I'll do it over here in Google Sheets first. So I'll select those two columns, horsepower and fuel efficiency, and I go Insert, Chart, and happily, by default, Google Sheets was right. It knew I wanted a scatter plot. And there's some things that I would want to change about this plot. It's not ideal that some of these high values get cut off. I'm also not happy with how fuel efficiency is on the x-axis and horsepower is on the y. I think with these programs, that decision gets made based on like which column is on the left in the data frame. And I would rather have horsepower on the x, because I think horsepower is one of the things that causes a car's fuel efficiency. So I can change that. I can go in here in this chart editor and I can click here and switch the x variable to be horsepower, and I can change series here to be fuel efficiency. So this is the graph. The data points are what I want, and the axes are how I want, but the axes labels now are still referring to what the graph was previously. So now I've got these like incorrect axis labels, but this is kind of getting closer towards the graph I wanted. Okay, so exact same thing in Excel. I've highlighted those two columns, and I'm going to go Insert, and I'm going to go into this little menu here that looks like a scatter plot and select that scatter plot. And again, some things that I'm not a fan of, like there's no labels at all here, and there's big white space. If you're interested in learning how to tweak features of graphs in Excel or Google Sheets, there's a lot of kind of video tutorials on how to do that out there on a lot of websites that teach you how to do that. That's not something that we're going to focus on in this course. What you should know in this course is how to look at a graph like this and identify the things that need to be fixed about it. All right. Okay, so what about a line graph? I'm just going to delete this here and go back to Google Sheets. I can change this graph to a line graph if I go back into my chart editor and select chart type and then scroll down and just pick line. And what's happened is now Google Sheets is drawing a line from the first point to the last, connecting all these lines into a series. But it's a really nonsensical series because the order here is just the order of the vehicles that are in this data frame, and they're just in alphabetical order. There's no reason why you would draw a line between these data points in this particular series. So it's really like a nonsensical line graph. So what I want to do is show you how to make one that maybe makes more sense. And I'm going to copy these data into a new sheet, and I'm going to make a new variable here called time that I'm just making up. So time is just going to be a series of numbers counting upwards by 1 all the way to, oops, the last car here. And so you can imagine time might be like year or day in a series. And if I select these two columns, I can go Insert, Chart, and it knew I wanted a line graph, was smart enough to guess that. And now you can see like this is a line graph that makes sense because now we've got a scenario where each X value has only one Y value. So this data set makes sense to plot as a line graph. All right. Okay, so there's two more. And you can do this in Excel. I'm just not going to bother to show it just in the interest of time. Okay, so there's two more types of graphs that I want to show you. The other really useful one that I want to show you is a box plot. And I'm just going to delete, actually I'm going to delete this whole sheet here. A box plot is really good for showing the relationship between a numerical variable on the y-axis and a categorical variable on the x. For example, we could be interested in how fuel efficiency differs for different size classes of car. A box plot is a great way to show that. It turns out that Google Sheets is not a good platform for making box plots. It can be done, but it's very finicky. You have to have a spreadsheet with all the little features of the box plot quantified in their own cells. And so it's not going to be worth it to do it that way. So, however, Excel makes a box plot like that quite easily. And all I have to do is select these two variables. So I've got my categorical variable, I've got my numerical variable, and then I'm going to go insert, and then I'm going to look in the menu with the histogram looking thing here, and I've got box and whisker plot. Select that, and great, I've got my box plot, right? So it doesn't have an axis label on the y-axis, but these are the fuel efficiencies. And we can see a box plot here showing you the distribution of fuel efficiencies for each of these size classes. So you can right away see, okay, small cars are generally more fuel efficient than large ones and mid-sized ones, and vans are generally have quite poor fuel efficiency. All right. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you how to do is a graph to depict the relationship between two categorical variables. And the two that I want to look at as just an example are the type of airbag system a car has. And so we have cars that have no airbags back in 93, or we have cars that have just the driver has an airbag, or both front seats have an airbag. And the other categorical variable I want to see is whether it's related to airbag type is the origin of a car, whether it was American made or something made outside of the United States. Okay, so in both of these programs, Google Sheets and Excel, for me to plot that grouped bar graph, I need to use these pivot tables, these pivot charts. So what I do in Google Sheets is I go data pivot table and I say create. And so it makes this blank pivot table that I then have to fill in. And so what I'm going to do is add in those two variables that I'm interested in, as one is the row and one is the column. And you could do it either way. It'll change the way the graph looks, and I'll try to show you that. So let's try that airbags as our rows, and let's put in let's find origin and have that as our columns. Okay, so what we're building up here is a contingency table. Right now we just have the labels. We don't have the values, the counts in it yet. So we have to add something in here. I'm going to just put airbags in here. I think it doesn't matter what I add in there under values. And what that did was it populated my contingency table. Okay, and you can go in and check. I know there are 93 cars in the spreadsheet, so I'm pretty sure that this is all correct. I'm going to get rid of this pivot table editor, so I can use this pivot table now to make my grouped bar graph. And I'm going to select the part of the pivot table that doesn't include the totals. I don't want the totals to be part of this graph, so I just select that, and then I go insert chart. And oh, I'm a bit zoomed in. I'm going to zoom out a little bit for you, maybe make this smaller, move it over. So I've got my grouped bar graph, so I can see the three airbag categories here, and then origin is shown by colors, and the height of these graphs is representing how many cars there are in each of these categories. So what I can conclude from this is that there's not too much of a difference between American-made and non-American-made cars in each of these categories. However, if you add them up, there's a tendency for the cars that did have airbags, that's these two blocks, I guess, slightly more likely to be American-made, whereas the cars that don't have no airbags at all may be slightly more likely to be made outside the US back in 1993. I can switch the way that pivot table is done. I can kind of delete this stuff and redo it. So last time I had airbags as the rows, I can put origin as the rows, and I could put airbags as the columns. And it's the same information, it's just the transpose of the last one, and I can select that and insert the bar chart. So exact same information, just a different decision about how to depict it. And yeah, so we can see the kind of distribution of airbag types for American-made cars and distribution of airbag types for non-American-made cars. Okay, so how do we do that in Excel? Same idea. We just go Insert, Pivot Chart, OK. All right, and then we're going to build this pivot chart. So I'm going to find one of the two variables I want. So airbags is one of them. I'll select it. I'm going to drag it down to categories. Right away, I get the frequency table. In Excel, it makes me the bar graph right away. This is just a bar graph for this single variable, though. And to make it the group bar graph, I get my other variable, and I bring it down to series. And there we go. We've got now this contingency table with rows and columns, and we've got this grouped bar graph now. And if I swapped origin and airbags, I can present it the other way, just like we did in Google Sheets. All right, so that's how you make a contingency table and a grouped bar graph for categorical data. Hopefully you'll be able to use this to help you on your upcoming homework. But don't hesitate to reach out to the TAs if you're having trouble getting these things to work. I would especially recommend coming to the Tuesday Zoom session. That's a great time to get one-on-one help with this kind of thing because you can share your screen and things like that. All right, goodbye.